Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. Is this going to get your attention yet? You're already in. You understand the problems with wokeness. You see it everywhere. You see what they're up to. But I know you have a friend or family members or coworkers who don't quite get it yet. They're still ignorant as to what it is and where it's headed. Give them this example of wokeism at work and infiltrating every single institution in America. I think this is the worst one I've heard yet. The National Archives, right? So this is a part of the federal government. This is the group that's in charge of physically protecting and intellectually promoting the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. It's a physical location in D.C. If you go to D.C., you got to go, and you got to go now while it's still there. They got this big giant rotunda, and it has these documents there behind the glass. If you've ever seen National Treasure, this is what Nick Cage, where he steals the Declaration, right? Right there, the rotunda, right? The National Archives. They've said that they released an internal memo that the rotunda itself is structural racism because the founding fathers and other white Americans are portrayed, in their words, too positively. Now, this internal report had a bunch of like normal whining. Here's some. There's a lot of legacy descriptions that use racial slurs and harmful language to BIPOC communities. That's Black, Indigenous, people of color, which includes actual racist slurs, that doesn't name any, but actual racist slurs alongside terms such as elderly, handicapped, and illegal alien. Okay, so that's like your normal like political correctness whining, right? Again, they didn't go into any details as to what the actual racist slurs are. They just say that they exist. But then they get into much more concerning language. Examples of structural racism, such as language that lauds wealthy white men in the nation's founding while marginalizing BIPOC women and other communities, all right? Lauds wealthy white men. Wealthy white men, you mean like our founding fathers? Lauding, praising the people who wrote the documents that created this country the week before the 4th of July. We're talking about this. Heaven forbid we laud them. Here are these documents, literally physically behind this glass, that created this country that we live in. Who are those people? Oh, they're these people up on the wall. Heaven forbid we laud them. They're white. The report also called for trigger warnings when you walk in and you view these documents, trigger warnings to forewarn audiences of content that may cause intense psychological and physiological symptoms. Trigger warnings before you go in and see the Declaration of Independence. They also have a website, the National Archives does. It's called ourdocuments.gov, and they have a section, 100 milestone documents of American history. And they say that the documents use excessive adulation language to document the historical contributions of white wealthy men. Too much adulation of white wealthy men. For example, if you look up Thomas Jefferson, as one should on this upcoming 4th of July, he's described in this sample lesson plan as a visionary who took vigorous action to strengthen the will of the nation to expand westward. Lewis and Clark expedition. The plan does not mention that his policy of westward expansion forced Native Americans off their ancestral land, encouraged ongoing colonial violence, and laid the groundwork for further atrocities like the Trail of Tears. How dare you not mention all those things? Now, this is not, again, tell this story to your friend who's like, oh, you're overreacting with all the woke stuff. Like, this is not a rogue teacher in a classroom making a TikTok video. This isn't even a state board of education, which is bad enough. This is the federal government, not only a part of the federal government, but the National Archives. This is the group that's literally in charge of protecting our history, right? Like, right there. Where's the Declaration of Independence? Oh, it's right here. Who's in charge of that? The National Archives. And these are the people who are like, nah, too much white. Too many white people. Too many white guys. These are the people who are now disparaging our founding fathers. The founding fathers who wrote the documents that formalized the ideas that led to the greatest and most free country in the history of the world. Amazing. But not surprising. Remember, to these people, these activists, everything is racist. Literally everything. There's a Twitter account called Libs of Tik Tok. Libs of Tik Tok. And the other day, they wrote a challenge. They said, write one word in the comments, and I will go and find video on why that thing is racist. Ready, go. Okay? So for instance, someone wrote sunglasses. Okay? So go try to make sunglasses racist. Show me someone who said that something as benign as sunglasses, how could that possibly be a racist thing? And sure enough, someone made a TikTok video about how glasses are racist because the design of glasses assumes that you have a high nose bridge. And there was an Asian woman who said wearing glasses causes her pain because she has a lower nose bridge, and that physical pain over something that she can't control, having a lower nose bridge, that physical pain she feels is racism. You think I'm kidding? Here it is.
But if I have to have physical pain from not having a nose bridge and something I can't control, that's racist.
So let's go through some of the answers here. Dieting is racist. Technology is racist. Dogs are racist. Water is racist. So someone wrote that again, like the guy's like, challenge me. Give me something you think cannot possibly be racist, and I will show you someone who said it's racist. And someone wrote oxygen. Okay? Oxygen. How can oxygen be racist? And he quoted a Mother Jones article. This is how racist your air is. How about cats? Popular science. Furry racism at the pound. Why is it harder for black cats to find homes? Someone said, how about oranges? Are oranges racist? This is from the University of California, Not Just a Still Life. The racist messages behind American images of fruit. Someone wrote strawberry. What is a strawberry? Poverty and racism. This is one of my favorites, birds. What was it, birds? How are birds racist? This was in Washington Post last week. The racist legacy many birds carry. Birders grapple with complicated past linked to slavery and white supremacy. What? The racist legacy many birds carry. All right, horses. This is what racism looks like in the horse world. How about cheese? Environmentalist activist says cheese is racist and dairy shouldn't be served in schools. Why? Because some black people are lactose intolerant. Pokemon Go. Is Pokemon Go racist? How the app may be redlining communities of color. Veganism. This is an academic paper, Decolonizing Veganism. The unmarked whiteness of veganism is ubiquitous. Milk. Is milk racist? This is PETA. How cow's milk is the perfect drink for white supremacists. Recycling. Houston Chronicle. Racism and recycling. The one bin for all means pollution for some. Wizards, okay? Are wizards racist? Northern Michigan University, not so magical. Issues with racism, classism, and ideology in Harry Potter. Countryside, as COVID hit, Brits escaped to the country. Minorities face rural racism. Used clothes are racist. Breast cancer is racist. This one's one of my favorites. Toothbrushes. This is an academic paper. Experience of racism and toothbrushing among pregnant Indigenous Australians. That's great. Pens. Business Insider. Uniball pen ad features ridiculously racist black gangster stereotype. Candy. NPR. Tainted treats. Racism and the rise of big candy. Racism and the rise of big... Coffee. Rooted in racism. Coffee's bitter origins. And these are my last two. I'm not sure which of these two are most meta. Again, the question was on this guy, Lib of TikTok. Name something. And I'll find a TikTok video or something showing you that someone thinks it's racist, okay? So someone said, okay, how about TikTok? How is TikTok racist? Sure enough, does TikTok have a race problem? And then this one's got to be the most meta of them all. Anti-racism. Anti-racism is becoming troublingly racist. Even anti-racism is racist. You want to try to out-woke the other person? Everyone's trying to say everything's racist, right? But you want to be the most woke of them all. You say that anti-racism is racism. Now, if I say that, it's racist. But if you're super woke and you say it, then you're like the wokest of the woke. And then I'm going to go with my favorite here is time. Time is racist. The concept of time, because it is it's a racial construct created by Europeans. And anything created by Europeans is racist. Time is racist. Okay? So that's just a fun little list there. So we're in a spot of absolute lunacy. I think the best way to get out of it is to mock it incessantly. Whatever it takes, it must be stopped. It must be stopped. How much longer until you are not allowed to praise our founding fathers at all? And you think I'm kidding. You think I'm kidding. Ask the people in the National Archives how they feel about the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence, which we used to be able to celebrate every July 4th. Amazing. So here's the true story. These people are sick. They are hell-bent on destroying everything good in our past to create their own woke present and communist future. And they won't stop until they are stopped. Are you with me? They will not stop until they are stopped. And it's a minority of people who, it's like the activists are a minority of people, it's a small minority. Most everyone else is just following along because they think it's like the nice thing to do or whatever. Or they just stay quiet or they don't want to get involved or whatever. No, you have to be bold. You have to. It comes down to you. You have to call out this insanity for what it is and help other people get the courage to do the same. What does it mean when our founding fathers, the National Archives, the people who are entrusted within the federal government? Now, we'll always know the truth, right? But when you have the people who are in charge of in the federal government who are in charge of safekeeping in like the most official way possible, literally our founding documents and everything that they mean, and they've gone woke to the point where they're like, oh yeah, these racist white guys, trigger warning, we're gonna get rid of them. When are people gonna be like, oh, maybe that's like a little much? How much longer are we gonna get bossed around by the people who say oxygen is racist, water is racist, time is racist? How much longer are you gonna be bossed around by these people? I wanna take a break here. I wanna come back. And I got more word policing coming on. It's a similar story, but we got even more, and it's getting more and more insane. And I don't know when a majority of the people are just gonna be like, okay, all right, we're done with that. But these people who just destroy, they still have all the power. I'll give you some more examples of that coming up next. And then what we can do about it, other than just be courageous, although that's a big thing. We'll do that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I hope you're as disturbed as I am by the National Archives and what they're doing to our founders as I am. Here's my metaphor of the day, all right? So I got 3 little kiddos. The oldest is 4.5. And our kids have these magnet blocks. Whatever, you can imagine any type of blocks, but they got these magnet blocks, and they play with them. And when Jack was born, my oldest, we'd bring him out and we'd play with him, and all he wanted to do was tear it down. And we had to teach him that Slaters build things up. We don't tear it down, we build up. Like the hard thing is to build it. His instinct as a child, as a baby, was to tear it down. So we had to teach him to build. So we did, and then he learned to build. And then my daughter Grace came along. And my Jack would build things, and she would just come over and tear it down. And Jack would get all upset. So we had to teach her that no, Slaters build things up. That's what we do. So she figured it out. They learned how to play together. They built together. Then my third kid came along, John. All he wanted to do was come over and tear it down. So the other 2 would get upset. They would ultimately move over to the kitchen table so that their towers didn't get knocked down. And then little Johnny felt left out. So we had to teach him that we are Slaters and we build with these magnet blocks. And he's just starting to get the hang of it, and the kids have now moved from the kitchen table, which is high up, down to the coffee table so that they can all start to build together. It is way easier to tear things down than it is to build things up. And that's all these adult children, social justice warriors, they're all just children. That's all they know how to do is tear things down. We just went over a bunch of things that are racist, and it's everything, right? From cats to oxygen to cheese, everything is racist, everything is problematic. Why? Because that is critical theory. So critical blank theory, there's different critical theories. Critical theory, the big umbrella, you have to criticize everything. You make everything problematic all the time, constantly. You're just a bitter, angry person all the time. And you just look around and you find racism everywhere. Like to the point where literally people have delusions. People walk down the street and they see a rope and they think it's a noose. Like that's a type of critical delusion state that people are in all the time. You're constantly walking around like that. That's what they do. And the pettier the thing that they tear down, the more social points they get. That's not quite right. That's not quite right. The bigger the institution they tear down, the more points they get. But the pettier the thing they find that racist, the more social points they get. That's what I meant to say. Let me say it like that. The pettier the thing that they find racism in, the more social points they get, social justice warrior points they get. Does that make sense? So if you say that Jim Crow laws are racist, you're not going to get any social points if you're in the woke cult. But if you say that oxygen is racist, right, then people are going to be like, oh, wow, like you're really woke. That's great. You're amazing. Does that make sense? So it's only going to get more and more absurd. Brandeis University, right? Brandeis University is the whitest university in the country, in the safest, wealthy. It is in the lily whitest part of Massachusetts. And they're always like, these small liberal arts schools are always the most woke, right? So they put out a list of banned words. Now, on their list of banned words, trigger warning is one, because a trigger is on a gun. So you can't say trigger warning anymore because it's too violent. Okay, so now it's content note. Okay, everyone, I have a content note I'd like to know. Isn't that amazing? It was just like 3 years ago, the first time I ever heard the word trigger warning. And now you got to outwoke that to content note. But the most absurd of them all is the word picnic. You can't say picnic anymore. Why not, Slater? The word picnic is often associated with lynchings of black people in the US, during which white spectators were said to have watched while eating, referring to them as picnics or other terms involving racial slurs against black people. Now, I will say here, again, it says the word picnic is often associated with lynchings of black people. I will note, no one has ever, in the history of picnics, ever one time in history equated it with the lynching of black people. It has never happened once. And they say it's often associated with lynching. No, never associated. It's never once been associated. I would say you're off the reservation if you're that crazy to think that picnic is racist, but those two terms are also on the list. You can't say off the reservation. You can't say crazy. There's no way a mentally stable person genuinely thinks if I say, hey, let's go on a picnic, do you have some bread and some lunch meats perhaps? They would say, oh, by picnic, do you mean lynch a black person? What do you mean? Are you referring to like an actual picnic where we eat food or a picnic where we go kill a black guy? I'm like, oh, I'm glad you asked for clarification. I was actually referring to a sandwich. Oh, good, because last week someone asked me if I wanted to go on a picnic, and I said, yeah, that's great, and I brought a sandwich, and they were actually lynching black people. That's never happened, ever. Doesn't exist. But do you know how many woke points that person got for being so traumatized by the word picnic? It's literally a contest to be traumatized by the most insignificant, benign thing possible. And picnic is like a wonderful positive connotation, like life's a picnic, or this, oh, what a great picnic. Picnic is like a positive thing, right? So if you could turn a positive thing into a racist thing, then you get even more bonus points. Another one is rule of thumb. You're not allowed to say rule of thumb because back in the day, under English common law, read white. it was legal to beat your wife with a stick as long as the stick was not any wider than your thumb. So if the stick was narrow enough, then the husband could beat their wife with it. So today it's sexist if you use that expression under any context whatsoever. Now, what I just told you isn't true at all. It's a total myth. That idea that was once a law, it was never a law. Completely made up by the feminists in the 70s, and it's taken on a life of its own. There's no evidence whatsoever that that law ever exists. It's completely fake, completely made up. But you're still supposed to be offended by it anyway. Isn't that a perfect metaphor for the whole thing? For the whole political correctness movement is to be outraged over an expression that like very few people ever even use because of a made up reason of where the expression came from that's not even true. All right, that's perfect. Okay, so what is this? All right, as I've been saying, it's to get bonus points because you're the most sensitive. If you can see racism in the most mundane things, you get bonus points from your fellow cult members. You get high fives and social points for seeing racism, right? Okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, and this gets a little more into the leadership, right? Like that first thing is like most people just on Twitter trying to be woke, right? Then you go a little deeper towards the leaders of this all. And then you get to a level where you're trying to humiliate people. We've talked about this before in other contexts, but if you can get people to stop saying the word picnic because it's racist, then you control everything. Let me flip it around. If you no longer say the word picnic because someone told you it's racist, that person has complete control over your language for the rest of your life until you say enough is enough, right? They've humiliated you. They've humiliated you. That you can't, you're like, oh, I don't want to, hey, do you want to go get bring lunch outside and eat it? You mean like a picnic? No, not a picnic. It's not a picnic. It's racist. Eat outside. Do you want to go eat outside? Al fresco. If they can get you to do that, you're humiliated. You're a child. They control you. They control your language, and ultimately they control your thoughts. So that's the other point of it. And the more ridiculous the thing, the more you're humiliated. Third reason, right? This sounds dramatic, but again, as I think I said this actually, when they control what you say, they control what you think. And you think that sounds like a lot, but why do they do it? Why do they constantly change the language and change words? And it gets more and more absurd all the time. Why? They care about it. It must be for a reason. So the deepest depths of it all, the true social justice warriors, they're in it for the communism. That's what it really is. This is the most important point of the day. Social justice. When you hear the word social justice, it means communism. Period. End of sentence. Now, I'm going to prove that here with one quote. This is from the United Nations. Let me make the statement again. When you hear the word social justice, and really anything justice, climate justice, hear justice thrown onto any word all the time, it means communism, period. This is from a UN report defining social justice for you. You ready? Social justice may be broadly understood as the fair and compassionate distribution of the fruits of economic growth. Social justice is not possible without strong and coherent redistributive policies conceived and implemented by public agencies. Okay? Social justice, they say, is the go back, you guys put that up, keep that up there. The first sentence, rewrite that first sentence. Social justice is the fair and compassionate distribution, okay? You mean redistribution of the fruits of economic growth. You mean money? What they said right there is social justice is the redistribution of goods. That's what that sentence is. That's communism. That is literally Karl Marx, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Is there any, like, am I unfair? Am I being unfair here? Social justice may be broadly understood as the fair and compassionate distribution of the fruits of economic growth. That's communism. So, any way and every way that they can point out an inequity, they'll do it. Why? As a justification to redistribute money. To who? Them. I'll give you 4 examples right here of how all this woke stuff turns into real money. This is from The Hill. There's a $10 billion Treasury Department mortgage assistance initiative for socially disadvantaged individuals, which is just people of color. There's a $1 billion Department of Agriculture initiative targeting socially disadvantaged farmers that would give out taxpayer money based on race and ethnicity. There's another USDA program that would spend $400 million to buy food from local, regional, and socially disadvantaged farmers. Socially disadvantaged means not white. And there's a $10 billion Small Business Administration credit program to emphasize funding businesses with non-white ownership. So there's 20-something billion dollars. Those are just 4 programs right there, okay? So that's how this woke stuff turns into real money. Now, I understand it's hard for people to wrap their head around it. It's hard for you and I to wrap our heads around it because it's so crazy and it's I don't know. I don't know where you are on it all, right? Maybe you're like, oh, that's getting a little too conspiratorial for me. Or if you're like, nope, I see it. So I don't know where you are in the process here. But I'll end with this. Rob Henderson, he found this Washington Post article from 1994. And it was all about how it's hard to pin down the number of deaths that Chairman Mao caused in communist China. No one knows. No one knows if Mao caused 30 million deaths or 40 million deaths or even 80 million unnatural deaths. And this article is about how it's hard to pin down. So why is it so hard to pin down? This is what they say. During critical periods, records were either kept secret or not kept at all. In many parts of China, the leadership still refuses to open records. But here's the key. In the early years under Mao, many Western scholars, that's us, were so enamored with Mao, meaning communism, that they refused to believe that such widespread atrocities could have been carried out by the Chinese communists. They were so enamored with Mao. They were so enamored with communism. They refused to believe that these communist policies could have killed so many people. They refused to believe that it could be true. And I argue today that so many people are enamored with themselves. They refuse to believe that what they're pushing for and what they're falling for could possibly be so disastrous. They refuse to believe it. Coming up next, the federal government's suing Georgia for the most ludicrous reason ever, and also the National Voting Rights Compact. This is, without question, the greatest constitutional end around in American history. And they're almost there. We'll talk about that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, you know HR1 and S1, this is the, was it For the People Act? This would have basically just federalized all of the worst ideas when it comes to running our election. No ID, same-day registration, mail-in voting, all that stuff. And we talked a lot about it on the show because when you combine that with the left wanting to get rid of the filibuster, it would have been a really big deal if it passed, but it didn't. And we kind of knew it wouldn't. It was still worth talking about, of course, but I knew it wouldn't. And every time we covered it, I was like, this is some distraction. It's worth talking about, no doubt. We need to know. But there's something else going on here. And I think the whole point of that was, well, it's always worth, they always want to push it down the field, right? And move that Overton window the best they can. But I also think that the left was distracting us from the National Popular Vote Compact. Are you familiar with this? I made the claim, and I want to see if our next guest agrees, that this would be the greatest constitutional end around in our history. What is it? What's the National Popular Vote Compact? Our friend Trent England is here from SaveOurStates.com, and you got to watch the documentary Safeguard. What's going on, Trent? How are you, brother?
Hey, Mike. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, man. Long time no talk. So, give us the definition. What's the National Popular Vote Compact?
Yeah, so this is state legislation that would have the effect of nullifying the Electoral College without actually changing the Constitution. And they would do that by getting states to change their laws so that they would ignore how their own voters vote in presidential elections and instead they would choose their presidential electors and thereby give away their electoral votes based on the national popular vote. It would force the Electoral College to rubber stamp the national popular vote results. And I totally agree. This would be the greatest end around in our constitutional history by far. It would fundamentally change how our elections work, not just for president, but really, up and down the line.
So let's give an example. So it looks like Colorado was the most recent state. Is that right? So
Yeah.
let's say the people of Colorado vote for, let's say this was already in effect. The people of Colorado voted for Donald Trump, right? People of Colorado, Donald Trump, our whatever, 8 votes go to Donald Trump. But if this was in effect, well, which I guess it is now in Colorado, but once it triggers, if they get enough states to do it, then they would be like, okay, well, the people of Colorado voted for Donald Trump, but a majority of people in America voted for Biden, therefore our electors are going to go to Biden instead. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, that's exactly how that would work. And, it would give, that's a great example because, just Los Angeles County has more people than the entire state of Colorado, right?
Wow.
LA would have more control over Colorado's electoral votes than voters in Colorado do. It's crazy.
Whoa, wow, that's amazing. Okay, how close are they to getting this done? Because I remember, actually, of all people, Dick Morris was the first person I heard talk about this. And it was like 5 years ago, maybe, something like that. And it was still kind of far away, but how close are they to getting this done?
Yeah, they have 15 states plus DC. They control 194 electoral votes. That's like 70% of the way. It triggers when they get to 270 electoral votes. And so, that's the magic number. That's the majority. That would control presidential elections. They're almost 70% of the way to triggering this national popular vote compact.
Based on the states that have already signed up, I think California is one of them. So
California,
that's a big one, obviously.
Illinois. Yeah, they've got all the big really blue states plus the other really blue states have all jumped on board this. They want to shift power to the big cities because that's frankly that's where the power for the left is.
Can they get another 80 votes? How many states would they need to get? What other big states would they need to get in order to get to that 80?
They've been targeting states like Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona for a long time. They're in an interesting position because this is a campaign that comes from the left. It's funded by the left. It's passed mostly in left-wing states, but they are pouring money into lobbying Republicans because they really need to win, some red or red-leaning states in order to get this done. And they've been taking Republican state legislators on fancy trips to tropical islands. And it's a full court press out there to try to pick up, a state like Michigan. They took a couple dozen Michigan Republican legislators to Hawaii. They are working this really hard, and it's a big threat, but it's also something where as long as we can keep conservative and also just sort of Constitution-minded folks in the middle, and even on the left. There's some folks on the left who are, who understand the value of the Electoral College. And as long as we can keep all those people together, they can't get this done. But it takes a lot of work to keep all of these state legislators from being, distracted by shiny objects and, and fancy vacations.
I would say, yeah, drinks in Hawaii. What argument would they even make while they lobby these lawmakers in Hawaii, if they're even pretending to make an argument other than just here's a bunch of alcohol? But why would a Republican ever sign on to this?
The main argument that they make is that there are all these sort of secret Republican voters who would suddenly show up at the polls from places like California and New York if you just had a direct election for president. And, and look, I'm sure there are Republicans who sit at home in California. I'm sure there are Democrats who sit at home, here where I am in Oklahoma and in places like Kansas and Texas, right? But the reality is when you look at the polling that really digs in on, Republican voters, Democrat voters, Republicans are more likely to turn out. Just for, sort of because it's our duty to go vote, right? That's more of a view that people on the right have than people on the left. The idea that there's millions of secret Republican voters out there waiting for, this subversion of the Constitution in order to go and cast their ballot, I think is just crazy. But that's what they say.
Great point. Never thought of that. Okay, you mentioned they. Where's the money coming from? Who are these? Who's the they? That's
Yeah, I mean, this is a campaign that has it has a lot of support from the Soros network, as you would expect. Jonathan Soros, who's George Soros' son, has chipped in a couple $1 million at least. But most of the money comes from a very obscure man out in San Francisco who invented the scratch-off lottery ticket back in the 70s. He's a mathematician. He invented the algorithm that powers scratch-off lotteries. And so he has basically plowed his winnings from that into, trying to subvert the Electoral College, and also, a lot of big checks to the DNC and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and folks like that. So, I mean, he's very much on the left, and he's invested his fortune and a lot of his energy in this national popular vote campaign.
What? That is not the answer I thought you were going to give. Do you have the guy's name off the top of your head? I want to do more research on him.
Yeah, John Koza. John Koza, he's a professor he's been a professor at Stanford and a computer scientist out in California.
Whoa, that is wild. All right, we'll do more on him. All right, Trent England, you're the man. SaveOurStates.com for more information on Trent and the whole team over there. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you, man. And watch the movie Safeguard as well. It's on Amazon Prime, all about the Electoral College. All right, coming up next, speaking of voting, Georgia passed their voting bill, right? Which is, we don't need to go through the whole thing yet, but remember it was like the worst thing in the world. It was a horrific a movie. It shouldn't even be filmed in Georgia anymore. Jim Crow 2.0, the whole thing, right? And it was nothing. It was a giant nothing. It didn't even go nearly far enough, quite frankly. Well, the federal government is suing Georgia. This may be the most ludicrous lawsuit I've ever heard, and we'll go over it in detail. And that's like literally one of the points they make against Georgia is all the sponsors of that voting bill were white. We'll detail that coming up next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.
The Department of Justice is suing the state of Georgia. Our complaint alleges that recent changes to Georgia's election laws were enacted with the purpose of denying or abridging the right of black Georgians to vote on account of their race or color in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, this is so sad. I feel bad for Merrick Garland right there. That was Obama's choice to be on the Supreme Court. And of course, it was at the end of his term, so he didn't even get voted on. But he almost was on the Supreme Court. Now he's Biden's attorney general. And this lawsuit beclowns him in a really undignified, sad, pathetic way. I almost feel bad for him. Bob Barr is here, former congressman up in northern Georgia. Mr. Barr, how are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing good. I actually don't feel sorry at all for the attorney general. He made his bed. He's got to sleep in it. I think he has a chip on his shoulder that is fairly large, and he's looking for Republicans and Republican states to go after to get back at Republicans for denying him the Supreme Court nomination or confirmation 3 years ago.
That's a really good point. You're right. He could either be like a guy who's begrudgingly like going along because his boss tells him he has to, but he feels embarrassed about it inside. Or he's like, he's like chip on the shoulder, like we're going after these Republican states now because they're the ones who kept me from the real job I wanted. Real good, let's go back. What was the Georgia election law that we heard was the worst piece of legislation ever passed in the history of mankind and basically legalizes lynching people? It was like the worst thing ever, Congressman. So what was the bill really?
The legislation that the legislature passed and the Governor Kemp signed several weeks ago is actually a very modest piece of legislation designed to plug some loopholes in the problems that we have seen and that everybody knows existed with massive mail-in balloting, absentee balloting, for which there is no effective way to verify signatures on those absentee ballots. That's the problem. That's what this legislation was designed to fix. It did not go nearly as far as some people had wanted it to, but it apparently went way too far for the U.S. Department of Justice.
And we've shared all these talking points before, and it's been a while. I say talking points, not, I mean, it's the truth, what we shared. But there are states like Joe Biden's Delaware where the voting laws are way more restrictive than this Georgia bill. I remember the governor of New Jersey came out right when this was all going on in Georgia and passed his own new voting law. And he only, I forget the number, but he only had something like 5 days of early voting. And this Georgia bill has 20 days of early voting. So the whole thing crumbles. Why is the Attorney General not going after Delaware or New Jersey for being racist?
Obviously, because these are not states that had any role in his warped view of why he was denied the nomination and confirmation as a Supreme Court justice. There, of course, has been a lot of publicity about the 2018 election in Georgia, which Stacey Abrams still refuses to concede that she lost to Governor Brian Kemp. We had the not only the November 2020 election, but the special election for 2 Senate seats and runoffs on January 5th of this year. So there was a tremendous amount of attention brought to bear on Georgia. There's tremendous pressure from Stacey Abrams and other Democrats to make Georgia an example. And that's exactly what this administration is doing. They're making Georgia an example to intimidate states from trying to clean up their election laws to make it harder to cheat.
This is from the Department of Justice's complaint. This is an actual quote. On February 17th, SB 202 was introduced in the Senate with only white sponsors. Like, how can that be, Congressman, a legal complaint? How could that be put in there? What are they?
Most of this 146 pages, I think it is, about 50 pages or so of the actual complaint, starts out with a bunch of statistics that have nothing to do with the law, nothing to do with this particular case that they're alleging here, but simply are thrown in there to paint Georgia as this deeply and irredeemably racist state in order to justify this bogus action against Georgia.
Where does it go? What happens next? And is this something that goes to the Supreme Court eventually?
I suspect it probably will. Although it is brought by the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Division up at Maine Justice, who is, by the way, one of the most extreme attorneys who has ever occupied that position, and there have been some extreme ones in the past. The venue is the U.S. District Court here in Atlanta. So it will be tried in Atlanta, and we will see, of course, a lot of pretrial motions and hearings and so forth. Then if it actually goes to trial without going up on a pretrial appeal of some sort, we'll have a trial, and whoever wins, whoever loses, I think there's a high likelihood that it will make its way to the Supreme Court.
Wow, what a total waste of time. Congressman, we've got like 1 minute. What's the future of Georgia? Is Georgia going to stay blue, or is it going to turn into a red state again? What's going on?
It hinges on the upcoming election in 2022. If, in fact, Brian Kemp, the current governor, is reelected, I think we will have held back the so-called blue tide. If he is not reelected, if Stacey Abrams jumps into it and wins, then I'm afraid we'll see a whole series of dominoes being other state and local elections falling into the Democrat column. I don't think that will happen, but it is a frightening prospect.
Yeah, Congressman, definitely when we get a little closer, I want to talk about how that's happened, how Georgia, a reliably red state, we thought at least, could have even gotten in this precarious situation. Unfortunately, we have to run, sir, but let's do that another time.
Look forward to it.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you for your insight. Congressman Bob Barr right there. Insane. Merrick Garland, what a, again, I just beclowning himself with this lawsuit. But you know the truth. Don't let people get away with the lies. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. We'll see you tomorrow.